Hello, we're live. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Nell, and it's good to be back live for one of our Lunch and Learns. I can still hear the tornado sirens being tested in the background, but we'll push on through. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Gordon, who is the Vice President of the Dunbar Alumni Association, and we'll talk all about that. Dr. Gordon actually is a retired principal from here in the Topeka public school systems. She was the principal of McClure Elementary School most recently. So hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Just had a great weekend. I know you did. There's a lot of Juneteenth things going on. So happy Juneteenth to everyone today, and I hope you had a great weekend.
Happy Juneteenth to you as well. I know the first question I always ask all of my, and I didn't put it on the agenda I sent to you, but I ask it to all of my guests is what are you having for lunch?
Probably a glass of water, because then I'm going to go help my daughter do her apartment. So nothing fancy today, just water and work.
Yeah, I understand. I have a lunch appointment with a friend, so we're gonna go out for lunch here once I'm done with this and get everything packed up.
That's
okay.
Nice.
So today, I asked you on because you had contacted me about the Dunbar School Alumni Association and sent some material over, and then you and I had a chat, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. Let's get the word out about it. Sort of falls under Kansas Black history. So do you want to get, I was going to read your mission statement.
Okay.
So here's what I can tell people about the Dunbar School. After the first Dunbar School reunion in 1991, the Dunbar School Alumni Association was organized in 1993 to preserve and promote the special legacy that is Dunbar. The legacy is embodied in a living statement by those who graduated from, attended, or who were touched by Dunbar School. The need to promote the educational achievement and strengthen the character and positive self-esteem is as real today, perhaps more so as it was in 1922. This uniquely segregated educational experiment produced a quality of achievement, character, and productivity that appears to be a passing value today as Dunbar is passed into the history after 1955-56 school year. The association, through its endeavors, seeks to preserve the positive historical legacy of Dunbar and in some meaningful manner pass this important legacy to the youth of the present and future generations. So now I'm almost going to just turn it over to you because it's fascinating the story you have to tell.
All right.
And give us the background.
Okay. So if you have my first slide up, the cover page there, it says Dunbar School, A Brief History.
Oops, there we go.
You'll see a picture of the school and sort of the children that are going in the front door, very kind of hard to see there, sort of in the background, but that is a picture of the building. And believe it or not, the building is still standing. It is was owned recently by St. Francis Ministries, but has just been sold this year. Let's go to the next slide. Prior to 1922, schools in Salina were integrated. My mother at this time started kindergarten a few years after this picture, but I placed Longfellow Elementary School in this PowerPoint and a picture of some students in the second ward in Salina, just to kind of demonstrate that, there were schools available and the schools were integrated. This particular school was on the corner from my mother's childhood home, and she had to walk past it, of course, to go to Dunbar School. It sat on Elm Street, so she would walk to the corner. There was the school. She would turn left, walk east to Elm Street, which was about 5 blocks from her home. Next slide. So how did this all come about? There was what was called first class city status. And so once a city reached a population of 15,000 residents, the city had the authority to organize and maintain separate elementary schools for Black and white children. This happened throughout the nation, and So it was sanctioned in 1896 by the U.S. Supreme Court's case decision that we know about, which is Plessy versus Ferguson. And they, that found that there was no constitutional exception to a Louisiana law requiring separate railway coaches for blacks and whites if blacks were offered equal accommodation. So this separate but equal principle carried over and legitimized racial segregation in public transportation, carried over into racial segregation of schools. In response to those two laws, boards of education in cities like Topeka, Wichita, Salina created a dual system of racially segregated schools. Next slide. When the city's population did reach that 15,000, as I said, in 1920, it was declared a first-class city. The Salina School Board of Education found itself able to exercise certain powers that was authorized by the general statutes of Kansas. And among these were the power to organize, maintain separate schools. So that was found, if you would look, if anybody's interested in school laws, Article 3, Section 147, School Laws 1919 to 1920. Next slide, please. So the school board did not want to sort of take this decision on their own. And what they did was they decided they would offer this opportunity for building a separate school for the colored children of Salina through a general election. So the school board did adopt a resolution that it was necessary to provide funds to issue in the issuance of school bonds for $65,000 for acquiring the site and the erection of a new school building for Black children or colored children, as we were called back then. And they held that election on January 29th, 1921 for the issuance of the bonds. Next slide.
So I have a quick question. So
Yes.
the Salina schools were integrated before this. Were
Yes.
there complaints about the integration? Like, was it an issue, or was
Not
it just
not that I have ever heard reported? I believe that at this time, and I'm, maybe just making a supposition here, that the school board, the city was now a first-class city. So what do we do? What do we get to do if we're a first-class city? And one of the things that they were able to do was to segregate schools. So it's more maybe just a classism issue around that. There weren't any complaints as far as I ever heard. There were community members that did come forward to the school board meetings to say that they weren't in agreement with their decision to segregate schools. There was also a organization of churches that sent a letter and presented to the school board that they didn't feel this was of the best benefit for the community and children of color.
Yeah, I think that detail was a part that really fascinated me.
Yeah.
That the schools were integrated, and
Yes.
then in the 1920s,
Yes.
there was a vote to segregate
Yes.
the schools. I
Yes.
think so often, I know so often people who are alive now seemingly think, well, this is the way it's always been, with no real understanding how history has circled and cycled and tumbled over itself. So
Yes.
that's part of the reason why this story was so fascinating to me.
I might mention along with that, even though, the population, of course, of African Americans in Salina had risen from the early founding of Salina, in the 1800s. So, maybe this was a factor in the school board's decision, because by the 1920s, there were more African Americans. But, who's to say? We weren't privy to any of their meetings that I know of. There may be some records or documentation, but we haven't heard that. But what we do know, if you're on the slide that says new school location, is that the school board did a little PR to have this all come about. They hired an architect out of Oklahoma, and they bought property in what we called in Salina the Bottoms, which is sort of the northeast part of Salina. You'll see a little map. It says Dunbar School. And so they bought the property in that area. If you change to the next slide, oops, you'll see that the property was bought, the plans were made, and then the vote happened, which I thought was interesting. So the vote, if you have that slide up, and I'm saying that because I'm also looking at my slides on my laptop. So that's why I'm saying, making sure we're on the same slide. The votes were cast. There were only 2,527 votes casted at this time. And the vote was won to segregate schools by 463 votes. The first ward, which is where most of the African Americans lived in Salina at this time, did vote in favor of having the segregated school, but the vote was 177 for that first ward to 150. And there's a little article I had included with the information about the vote that day. So if we would move to the next slide. A little date there. William T. Schmidt of Oklahoma was chosen to develop those plans for the schools. The school board allowed our Black community to name the school, and they named the school after Paul Laurence Dunbar. Next slide. And we know a little bit about Paul Laurence Dunbar, I'm sure, or maybe more than a little bit, because he was quite the prolific writer and poet. And at one time in Salina, this is kind of like what trivia, but at one time in, not Salina, in the United States, there were over 60 high schools around the country named for Paul Laurence Dunbar. And other institutions were named after him, and a theater. And those were high schools, which, while I'm at this point, I wanted to mention that the difference about our particular school in Salina, Kansas, was that the school was established for kindergarten through 8th grade. So it was elementary and what we would call junior high or middle school for our colored children in Salina at that time. Next slide, please. So the school opened on September of 22nd in 1922. Again, it served K through 8th grade students. It was the most modern structure at that time when it was built. They said it was equipped with complete building plant, 7 classrooms, an auditorium, and a gymnasium. They had a kindergarten classroom as well as a faculty office there in the building. The building was formally dedicated on November 17th in 1922. Next slide, please. We happen to have a copy of the dedication program, which we love to look through and see who was there, a part of that process. They had children perform, had guest speakers, and it was, I think, a pretty celebratory time for the staff and students and families of Dunbar. Next slide, please. They reported it in the paper, of course, because this was an outstanding, I think, feat for the school board at that time. And there you have another picture of the building from another angle. When we get to tour the building, when we have had the wonderful opportunities over the years with each of our reunions to go back and just walk through the building. It's pretty much set up for offices throughout the building, but the alumni and their families really enjoy that opportunity to go in there and walk through and share memories about their time at Dunbar School.
Because the building's still in use. Like you said, it was still standing with.
It is still standing. I don't know, the behind the scenes, but it feels very solidly built from what we can see when we walk in and walk through, and has been well taken care of. And that we really appreciate by the previous owner, which was St. Francis Ministries, as I mentioned before. Next slide, please. So we felt that as we gather and have our reunions, that Dunbar School became a community center. Again, we said it was located, quote unquote, in the bottoms, and it became a hub. Dunbar had a PTO organization. They had Boy Scout Troop 8. They had a Girl Scout troop. Community and church programs took place. And I think the reason being was the auditorium that they had, which was an exception at that time because elementary schools didn't have auditoriums. So they had be able to have a stage, and the seating made it an awesome opportunity for a lot of community events. Next slide, please. We managed to kind of document and keep track of our staff that began with the opening of Dunbar on through till the closing. I want to point out that Powers Porter, who was the first principal at Dunbar School, his first job as principal was in Olathe, Kansas, which I found out as I was doing some history. And he also was a student of a local college in Salina, Kansas Wesleyan University. So we've enjoyed kind of finding out some histories in our connection to Kansas Wesleyan University. There are several teachers on this list that also attended Kansas Wesleyan University in those early years. If you can see a name on the right, Agnes Hudson started teaching at Dunbar in 1927, and she taught till it closed, and then she went on to teach at other public schools in Salina. Next slide, please. And I already mentioned about Powers Porter. The first faculty consisted of 6 teachers, 4 females and 2 males. The original enrollment when they opened that first year was 72 students. According to my mother, community members had to go door to door to kind of encourage some of the African-American parents to send their students to Dunbar, because of course, you want your kids to go to the neighborhood school. It's just more convenient. Students had to go home for lunch. So if the neighborhood school was only a block or 2 away, who wants to send their kids 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 blocks or more to the segregated school? But that's kind of what has transpired. Next slide, please. I believe these are some of the pictures of our teaching staff. Again, these are some of the teachers that attended Kansas Wesleyan University and also taught at Dunbar School. And that first picture, again, is of Powers G. Porter. Next slide, please. The enrollment increased. This should be the full slide of our first big picture of Dunbar School. At this time, there were probably a little over, it said 72. We were probably about close to 80 at this time in this particular photograph of from kindergarten to 8th grade, with staff interwoven in with the students. Next slide, please. Most notable staff person was Robert C. Caldwell. Some of you here in Topeka may even remember him. He began teaching at Dunbar in 1939. He taught for 3 years, then was drafted into the armed forces and left to fight in World War II. After his tour of duty, he returned to teaching at Dunbar in 1946. In 1954, he was assigned as principal of Dunbar School, and he served for 1 year until the closing. He went on to teach at Salina High School. He taught industrial arts until he retired in 1979. He was the first African-American to serve on the Salina City Commission, which he did for 4 consecutive terms, which I think translated into 6 or 8 years. And then he served as mayor for 3 terms. He was later elected to serve as our representative for the 68th District in the Kansas House of Representatives. He was an awesome community member, an advocate for students. He was very involved in the NAACP, very involved in his church, which was Allen Chapel AME Church. This is what I feel was most distinguished and notable about him, is that he served for 48 years as Scoutmaster for Troop 8. And I mean, I have no words for that. My brother, all of his friends, all came through Troop 8 with Mr. Caldwell, and they really have stories to tell. Mr. Caldwell received 2 of the highest awards or honors in scouting. It was the Silver Beaver Award and the Wood Badge Award. And, you know, he is sorely missed. Next slide, please. I'm trying to keep our time. There's a couple of articles that were featured in the Salina Journal where he was interviewed in talking about Dunbar School and our reunions. Next slide, please. One of our pictures in 1930 of Dunbar School. My mother's in one of the students in this picture, so it's always a treasure to have, and we really enjoy looking and going through our pictures. Next slide, please. Younger students there at Dunbar in the 1930s. Next slide, please. One of the things that Dunbar was noted for when it was up and running at full capacity was their pageants and programs. And so this was a spring pageant that the students dressed up for at Dunbar School. Next slide, please. One of the first grade classes getting close to the time of closing of Dunbar. I'm going to keep moving it. Next slide, please. Salina at one time had their elementary schools had like an all field day. So these young men who are Dunbar students participated and brought back the trophy to our school as outstanding performance at field day. Next slide, please. Dunbar class 1955. This is the class prior to closing one grade level anyway. And we just were so happy to get some of our pictures. They come in, kind of trickle in from alumni, and this came in just before we celebrated Dunbar's 100th anniversary in November. Next slide, please. There you go with the closing of Dunbar School. You know, by the time 1955, 1956, the enrollment was down. I don't have a copy of what the numbers were, but we're thinking probably fewer than 70. And of course, the impact of closing was impacted by Brown v. Board, as you know. I included a picture down there in the far left corner of Charles Scott. Charles Scott was involved, and well, was his family in the case. But Charles Scott was also a deacon in the church, in the Methodist Church, and came to Salina frequently to speak at Quail Methodist Church. And so that was a kind of our family's introduction to Charles Scott back in the late 50s and early 60s. Next slide, please. You know, I want to go in to talk about the historical significance of Dunbar School, and that's more personally what we've talked about through the alumni conversations. They felt that the Dunbar School, they tried to maintain those scholastic standards, and that they felt like the quality of achievement and character and productivity that they are very, very proud of. And of course, it was a very outstanding facility at that time. Due to time, I'm going to move right on to the next slide. In 1998, the city of Salina designated Dunbar School as a local historic landmark by the City of Salina Heritage Commission. The alumni gathered together to raise funds to put this dedicated marker there on the corner of Elm. And you can see the school in the background, and it's something the alumni were very, very, very excited and proud to have this happen. It took a lot of time and paperwork and meetings to get the designation to happen, but they did, and we feel they really accomplished a lot.
So this is like a Kansas historical marker then, right?
This is local. This is strictly local.
Okay.
Yes,
So
City of Salina.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Next
No, well,
slide,
that's
please.
good. I mean, it's good that to be recognized.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So the next slide was commemorating the 100th anniversary of Dunbar School, which we did in great fashion, including a tour, luncheon, and an afternoon program where we had speakers, student dancers. We recognized families that had teachers at Dunbar at that 100th anniversary, and it was just a great day. Next slide, please. We celebrated our oldest alumnus, which was Dr. Virginia Bell Ricard. She is blind and significantly blind, but she liked to paint. So this is her rendition of Dunbar School, which we had at the 100th anniversary, and we're able to reproduce it with a enrichment grant from the Horizons Grant Program in Salina. Next slide, please. We're excited because coming up next month, we are going to celebrate our 11th Dunbar School reunion. The reunions happen approximately every 3 years, with the exception of our stint with COVID. And so we are celebrating next month, July 21st through the 23rd in Salina. It is open to everyone, not just alumni, and we're encouraging families to come and anyone who's interested in Salina history to come and participate. We're going to have a great time. Next slide, please.
What kind of or well, you might get them in the next slide. What's going to happen during this week?
During the reunion, we are having a memorial service on Friday evening, the 21st. It will be at one of the churches, and there we do a slide presentation of the names and pictures of alumni who are no longer with us. We usually have a little speaker at that time and refreshments and for reminiscing. On Saturday, we have lots of fun things planned for people who like to exercise, people who like to play cards, people who like to play bingo, people who just like to sit and reminisce. We want to put together a little Dunbar yearbook for people to take around and have alumni sign. We're going to have a luncheon. We will have activities for youth at St. John's Baptist Church. We're going to have a mini career fair for the students at their event. And then in the evening, we'll have our banquet, and we will have Dr. Virginia Ricard's granddaughter, who is a assistant professor out of New York, who's going to come and talk about Salina, her family history with Dunbar, because she had 2 family members that taught there. And we're just looking very, very, very much forward to having Karina Yeager come to us and speak. That's it. I know I'm out of time, but I hope that people learn some new things about Dunbar, and I hope that if you have any questions, you can send them to me at our Dunbar email at Gmail, and questions from you that you have after you've kind of breezed through this.
No, you did. I mean, yeah, I knew. I'm like, she's got a lot to cover. I'm just gonna be real quiet and let her just march on through it. No, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the history lesson. I think it's so important now, given the cultural point we are in America, to be able to look back and find specific examples of African-American history.
Yes.
And then I love telling the story of Black people in Kansas. Like last week, or within the last 2 weeks, it was Angela Bates with Nicodemus. But to know that there's more to Kansas Black history than just Nicodemus, right? Yes. So to find, yes. I'm grateful that you came on here and you're doing stories about the Black experience and Black history in Salina.
Thank you. We feel that Dunbar has given us a legacy that we need to continue. I have a presentation on, what happened to the students at Dunbar, where I have selected Dunbar students and kind of march forward with their children or their grandchildren to kind of show where the Dunbar legacy has led them. So anytime you need another spot filled, let me know.
You got it. And then I'm always interested in the line going backward. Like well, we can imagine how Black people got to Kansas, but
Yes.
why
Yes.
did they
Yes.
come? Why did they
Yes.
choose to settle in Salina as opposed to
Yes.
Nicodemus, or as opposed
Yes.
to, you know, the Wichita area?
We will have a little information on that. I'm working with hopefully someone here locally in Topeka to kind of help me delve through some of our Salina Black history. And I have some documents through Dunbar and through my mother that we hope to put together into a book that's going to give people some more background about the history of African Americans in Salina. And so hopefully in a year or so, I'll have that all wrapped up and can bring that to you.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's so important, and I love that it's. I think it's important for us to be able to tell our own history, tell our own story.
Yes.
And to control that narrative and to get the information out. So,
yep.
All right, we're at time. That half an hour goes so quickly.
Very fast. Thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate it. You've been awesome, and thank you for helping me get the word out about Dunbar School.
Yeah, so if anyone, you know, if you are from the Salina, or your family's from Salina, or you maybe your grandparents or mother and father went to Dunbar, please do email. I was going to put that in the chat. Hang on, let me get out of my full screen. And I have your email address that I can drop into the chat.
All right.
So if anyone has any questions. Anyone has any questions? We'll go. There we go.
Want more information?
Please. Or want more information, it's Dr. Jennifer Gordon.
We also, while you're writing that, we also have a website. We're on Facebook, so you can find Dunbar School Alumni Association Salina on Facebook and our website.
Really? Okay, wait. Dunbar School Alumni
Association Facebook page.
School Alumni Association. I'll drop the link in the chat, and I'll do a Lunch and Learn links email.
Sounds good.
To get this information out as well. So the last thing I do every time when we have a Lunch and Learn is talk a little bit about the importance of voting. Right? We even talked about, even in this presentation, that the way that the schools got segregated was they put it to a vote.
Yes, they did. Okay, and all of Salina didn't vote, and so it counted back then, and all of the community did not vote. So it might have gone a different way had everyone voted.
Yeah. So if our history in Salina, Kansas doesn't convince you that you need to make sure that you are registered to vote and that you vote in every election, 2023 is considered an off year. It's an odd numbered year, but in 2023, that's when things like school boards are elected. So, you know, again, tying back into the story we just told about Salina and how the schools got segregated in Salina, there were people on the Salina school board. And so wherever you are listening to me, chances are there's school board elections, city council, city commissioners, the local elections are happening in the odd years. Please make sure that you are registered. Please make sure that you make a plan to vote. I will talk about it every time I come on here.
Awesome. Very important. Very important.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having us.
Gordon,
I appreciate it, Stacey.
I appreciate it. I know we will be in touch moving forward. I think I'm planning on trying to get out to Salina for a town hall soon, so we'll get it all figured out.
All right. Thanks so much. Drive by the school if you get over there.
I will. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.